Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to talk to you about some Bookish movies and TV shows that I've watched recently. Before I get started talking about anything else in this video, let me do a quick preemptive apology if I sound a little bit stuffed up right now. I am currently recovering from a very mild, mainly annoying cold. I've not been feeling 100% over the past, I'd say, week or so, but I'm on the mend. I am almost healed up. But during my period of trying to get some rest and trying to just zone out a little bit instead of actively using my brain in the way I do when I read books, I've been watching a lot of movies and TV, a lot of which are literary in nature, either book to movie, book to TV series adaptations. One is actually just more of a literary inspired movie. And I thought today I would tell you about some of those. I thought they might be of interest. I will say that this is not going to be a formal book versus movie or book versus TV show kind of video. I do make those. I will link a whole playlist for you in the description box and in the cards. In those videos, I really go in depth with how the adaptation differs from the book, and those normally require a reread of the book or a very recent reading of the book so I can compare, and I do a lot of research for those videos. That's a lot more work than I currently feel up to doing. So in this video, I'm just going to be talking about all of these different movies and TV shows, and I'm going to be giving you my impressions and all of my opinions. So if you're looking to hear about those, you're in the right place. I thought we would start off by talking about the book to TV series adaptation out there right now. It is so huge. Everyone is talking about it. It's the adaptation of Daisy Jones and the Six, which is on Amazon Prime. This is an adaptation of a novel by Taylor Jenkins Reid by the same name, and it's written as though it's a documentary, like a VH1 Behind the Music style episode about this fictional 1970s rock band that broke up very mysteriously after a concert one night. And no one has ever really gotten the full story of what happened. Why did they break up when they were on top of the world? But in this book, you get to hear the full story, what all was going on behind the scenes. And so this adaptation does a very similar kind of thing. It is also sort of in that documentary style, but then you're also getting a lot of scenes in the moment. For the most part, this was a pretty faithful adaptation to the book. Some things were changed, of course. It can never be one-to-one when you're shifting from one medium to another. There have to be some changes. But I found that it represented what you can come to expect in the novel pretty well. In fact, I think if you watch this series and you were really interested in the story, you really came to love these characters, there would only be more to gain if then you went back and read the novel if you never had before. And I think that is what every good adaptation should aim to do. I thought the casting was fantastic. I mean, they got Elvis's granddaughter to play Daisy Jones, and her voice with the guy who plays Billy, I forgot to look up his name. I think their voices sounded so beautiful together. I read in a few different interviews that Riley Keough, who plays Daisy Jones, she didn't really think she had any vocal talent. I don't know if they really gave her some intensive vocal lessons or what, because she sounds phenomenal. And they actually wrote an entire album for this show. It's up on Spotify. You can listen to all these tracks. It is a real album that they released. Now, that is definitely not 100% faithful to the book. They have definitely changed some of the songs. I know that was a frustration with people who listened to the audiobook of Daisy Jones and the Six. They really wanted to be able to hear the songs. Well, you do get to hear them in this series, even though they're not quite the same. I'm really glad that they beefed up Simone Jackson's role in the series. She's a pretty minor person in the novel, but in the series, she has her own storyline. We get to know her, and it also shows us as the audience that there is a simultaneous rise of disco at the same time as Daisy Jones and the Six were getting big. So it was really nice to have a person who kind of represented that. And she was a very lovable, very awesome character to get to follow. And in terms of other characters I liked, I liked the band for the most part. I really liked their banter, actually, in the background. In scenes where we weren't even really focused on them, they were just joking around, messing around like guys tend to do, and you really felt that they were friends. It made you feel this camaraderie within the band, like they really were a family, even though they did fight, which families do that. So I thought that that added so much. It made me laugh on more than one occasion, and it really did help you feel that this band was real. In terms of who the actual dreamboat of the band is, of course, the lead singer, Billy, is who everyone is probably going to focus on the most, but I thought the actual dreamboat was Warren, because of specifically something that happens during the finale, because to me, nothing is more sexy than gratitude. In terms of other things I liked about the series, I really like that they captured the electricity between Billy and Daisy. You can definitely feel that when you read the novel, and I knew that was going to be key for this series. And you can definitely feel it, that way that they work so well together in terms of their brains. They understand each other. They make wonderful music together. But then also they're just these two bombs of personality, and you can't put them too close together or else you get some sort of a chemical reaction. In terms of things I didn't like about the series, I think they really kneecapped the character of Camilla. She is such a force in the novel. She is the reason why Billy is successful. And they hint at that in the series. You can see her giving him pushes into things that she thinks will be in his best interest. But they show her as so much more vulnerable and having so much less agency. It's more as though things just kind of happen to Camilla versus Camilla going out in the world and making things happen for herself. She just kind of seems wounded in the series, and that is not how I pictured her in the novel whatsoever. I also really didn't care for one episode in the series. It's the episode in which Daisy disappears for a period of time. If you've read the novel, you might remember what I mean. They do change some details of that. The major points, the major things that come out of that disappearance are pretty much the same, but they have that go on for an entire episode. And it's this lull, this dead space right in the middle of the series. I think they needed to shorten that, maybe make it just half of the episode. But they added so much to it, clearly because they wanted to extend it into a full episode. It just kind of felt like filler. I don't think it needed to be there. And then a nitpicky thing, I didn't like that they cut an entire band member, because then the band name, The Six, doesn't really make sense if there are only 5 members. Overall, this is just a really good adaptation. It's fun, it's engaging, it's beautiful to look at, awesome style, very 1970s. I loved all the music. I could definitely picture myself going and listening to this album separate from watching the show, because I have a lot of the songs stuck in my head. I would really like to hear them again. Is it a perfect adaptation? Definitely not. They made some changes that I don't know if they should have, but those are the choices they made. And I just generally think they did justice to the book. You get the feel of the book when you watch the series. So I recommend it. But now let's talk about a different book to TV series adaptation that I watched recently. It's called the Flatshare. I watched this a few weeks ago before I got sick. I wanted to watch this before it came out in the US because I had just read the novel. I did not know that they were adapting it for the screen until I already put that novel on my TBR. I read it. I really, really liked the book, so I wanted to watch the TV series. But since it's only overseas, I had to jump through so many hoops just to be able to watch it, and included buying an overseas Paramount Plus membership. And I really regret doing that now, because this was not good. Let me start off by talking about the positives, because I didn't hate every single thing about it. It's just overall, I didn't think it worked. But one thing I definitely did like was the styling of it. I liked all the bright colors. I liked the music. I liked most of the clothes that the characters wore, all the style of it all. I just thought it was a very visually interesting show. It definitely kept me interested that way. And in terms of its faithfulness to the source material, material, they did follow the major plot points of the novel, and that I appreciated. As I've been thinking about this series since I finished it, I have had a few weeks to think about this. I think all of my problems boil down to one change they made to the novel. It's not even a huge change, but it sets into motion other storylines that they added in because of that change. The change that they made to the female main character, Tiffany is her name. In the novel, she works in publishing. But in this series, they have her work for an online magazine. They have her be a journalist rather than a book publicist. And that change sets into motion the addition of storylines of her getting a story about Leon's brother, about a rivalry with one of her coworkers, where in the book, that coworker is one of her best friends. Those additional storylines that they added in for padding in order to make this into a TV miniseries, I think really ruined the adaptation for me. And not just because it deviated from the book. I'm okay if they deviate from the book, but I think they changed the spirit of the book with those additions. This is one of the very few times where I actually wish they would have just adapted this into a movie and maybe actually trimmed some things off, as opposed to adding in additional things to get the number of episodes that they needed from it. And then there's the fact that they casted Jessica Brown Findlay of Downton Abbey fame in the role of Tiffany. Now, let me say, I love Jessica Brown Findlay. I think she's fantastic. I love watching anything she is in, and I think she did the most that she could in this role, but I don't think she was the right choice for this role. The character of Tiffany in the novel is described as being very tall and a redhead. And I am not a purist when it comes to casting characters in movies exactly as how they're described in the book. I really don't think that matters all that much, but I think it mattered in this case specifically because Tiffany's physicality has a lot to do with her personality. She has always been really tall and redheaded. She's used to being looked at when she walks in a room. And so she has kind of decided to lean into that. She dresses very eccentrically. She decides if I'm already going to be looked at, then why not just add different things and dress exactly how I want? Because who cares? I'm going to be stared at anyway. And so she has this self-assuredness to her. And who she is physically has so much to do with that. It also helps show us as readers in the novel that there's something really off with this relationship with her ex-boyfriend who she's trying to get distance from because she makes herself smaller when she's with him. When she's out in the world, she doesn't do that. So we get the sense that that relationship is really off. So these are all reasons why her being really tall and redheaded is really important to telling this story. So at the end of the day, it didn't really matter how good of a job Jessica Brown Findlay did because she didn't look like this character and therefore couldn't fully be her. I mean, at the very least, they could have dyed her hair, but they weren't exactly going to put her on stilts either. So I think they probably could have found maybe a less well-known actress to play this role, and I think it may have turned out better. Shave off 2 episodes, recast Tiffy, and I may have felt very differently about this one. But as it stands, it's a miss. But speaking of book to media adaptations that I had to work very hard just to be able to watch, boy, do I have a story for you. Okay, earlier this year, I read The Children by Edith Wharton, and as seems to happen to me a lot over the past few years, I finished reading it, and I found out that there was a movie adaptation. And of course, I've just read the book, so I want to watch the movie. So I go on justwatch.com. That's where I go to find where everything is streaming. I keep track of all the movies and TV shows that I want to watch or am currently watching. I go to Just Watch. It's not streaming anywhere. Okay, that's not a huge deal. I'll just rent it, right? It's not renting anywhere either. So I do a little bit more digging. Is this thing even available on DVD? Could I get it from a library maybe somewhere? No. There was a Kickstarter at one point to release it on DVD. I think the Kickstarter was started by one of the stars of the movie, Ben Kingsley. It was Kim Novak's final film. He wanted to kickstart the money to release it on DVD, but that Kickstarter failed. So it's only available on VHS. Okay, can I rent the VHS from somewhere? No. Interlibrary loan? Someone has to have a copy of it, right? no one had it. It is nowhere to be found. Apparently, this is a very rare VHS tape. So I went to my last resort, eBay, and I found a good old VHS. I have not held a VHS in my hands for many years, but I got one. And then came the question, I have it. How do I watch it? I then went to Craigslist and found this monstrous, extremely heavy DVD VCR player combo TV that my husband and I lugged into our basement, set up. It did not fit in the space that I had mentally envisioned it in. It was just this much too big. So I had to set up a whole station for it just to be able to watch this. I'm going to do a few other things with that TV, but I got it primarily to watch this. Now, was all of that worth it? I don't know. But now that I have finally watched this and rewound the tape, be kind, rewind. I have not rewound a VHS in probably 20 years. That was so strange. But now that I have finally seen this, I can tell you that it was surprisingly faithful to the novel. I had seen a trailer of this during the initial stages of my saga of trying to get to watch this, and it seemed to imply that they had made changes to the novel, to the story, making Martin Boyne, the main character, the father of this troop of children, which in the novel he definitely is not, which makes things all the stranger. But it seems to have maybe just been a little bit of false advertising on the part of whoever made that trailer, because this follows the book very closely, like beat by beat. All the plot points are there pretty much, which was nice coming from someone who's read the book, but also coming from someone who's read the book, I could see this being really confusing for anyone who hasn't read the novel, because they cover so much. They go through it all very quickly. I could see someone who hasn't read this novel becoming confused about how all these children are connected to each other, because it is all very vague, and I needed some time at the beginning of the book to fully understand how all these children were connected. They're sort of family, sort of not. And I don't really know what the purpose of making a movie adaptation of something is if you're potentially just going to confuse your audience. So once again, I have to ask myself, was watching this movie worth all of that effort? Probably not. But I can't say I'm too mad about the fact that we now have the capacity to play VHS tapes in this house again, because that nostalgia factor was very real. There are 2 more movies I wanted to tell you about before I go and get some more rest and try to fully kick this cold. But before I got sick, I actually took myself out to the movies one night to see Emily, which is a new movie that was inspired by the life of the poet and author Emily Bronte. And this movie was both written and directed by the actress Frances O'Connor, who I loved in the adaptation of The Importance of Being Earnest. This movie essentially asks one big central question. How did Emily Bronte come up with the story for Wuthering Heights? Where did she find the inspiration to write such a dark book? And depending on who you ask, Frances O'Connor either speculates on or totally invents this relationship between Emily Bronte and someone, I won't say who the someone is, and all the passion in that relationship and the darkness of that relationship helped her create the characters and the story of Wuthering Heights. Now, if you are a big fan of the Brontes and are really big on historical accuracy, you may not love this, because I do think it deviates pretty significantly from the truth of who the Brontes actually were. I think it gets close to the truth in terms of Emily's personality. I think it gives a take on her, but I know all of us, me included, tend to be a little bit plucky about things that we're close to when it comes to the accuracy. Like when it comes to Russian history in Russian historical fiction, I lose my mind if they change too much of the truth because I'm so close to it, because I studied it so closely. So I could see anyone who truly loves the Brontes enough to know all the little details that are known about their lives. I could see you having some problems with this one. But in terms of just a movie to watch, I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was a really, really interesting look at who Emily Bronte was. It was an interpretation more than anything else, rather than the gospel truth. I thought it used imagery and music beautifully to capture all the emotions that she wasn't able to speak aloud for one reason or another. I was blown away by this movie. So if you're not super bothered by the historical accuracy, if you could just enjoy this for what it is, I think you're in for a good time. And then finally, there's one more movie that I wanted to talk about in this video, and that's the adaptation of She Said that I watched a few nights ago with my husband. He wasn't even originally intending on watching this with me. He kind of accidentally started watching it because I put it on the TV because I wanted to watch it while he was on his laptop playing games or something. And every so often I would look over at him and he wasn't on his laptop. He was watching the movie. Then he'd go back to the laptop for a little bit. Then he'd go back to watching the movie. And eventually he just gave up on the laptop and joined me in watching the movie, which I think is a pretty good advertisement for it because it really is a good adaptation. It's an adaptation of a nonfiction book that I read a few years back. And that book is an account of two New York Times journalists as they attempt to report on decades worth of abuse committed by former movie producer Harvey Weinstein. Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan stars the two journalists. I thought they both did a terrific job. And I thought it was just very tasteful and well done. It's very much a similar experience to reading the book, and there are no gratuitous moments, no moments when they're trying to actually show or recreate these moments of abuse. They're just letting these women tell their stories in the hopes that this abuse cycle will stop someday, that if they are brave, they can prevent this from happening to anybody else. This was very powerful, so moving. Just a really, really good adaptation. Very quickly before my voice starts to give out, I wanted to say that there are two more miniseries, book to miniseries adaptations coming out soon that I am very excited about. And maybe I will talk about those in a future video if you're interested. There's Great Expectations and Tiny Beautiful Things, an adaptation of my favorite nonfiction book of last year. Particularly excited about that one, but Great Expectations looks wonderful as well. If you are interested in either of those, or if you know of any adaptations that I or anyone else watching this video might be interested in, I would love to hear what those are in the comment section below. All the movies and TV shows that I talked about today will be linked for you in the description box below for your clicking convenience. If you want to check those out and you're on a mobile device, just tap the title of this video and that description box will expand for you. And at the bottom of that exact same description box, you'll see links to everywhere you can find me around the internets, like Goodreads, Instagram, the Story Graph, all the places I'm the most active, just in case you want to keep up with what I am reading and writing about right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.